Welcome to Azure Community Conference, the first of its kind by the community for the community. It is a pleasure to deliver this session here. There is a pretty good agenda planned for this event. We do have fantastic sessions today and closing keynote by Aditi. Don't miss it. Please do check out the complete track listing and do join us for workshops tomorrow on ML.NET, full stack development, Terraform, WVD, and many more. So without wasting the time, let's get started.
Hello everyone and welcome to this presentation. Let's migrate that puppy. My name is Mayur Tendulkar. I work as a customer engineer in Azure Fast Track team within Microsoft India. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me at Twitter handle mentioned over there, which is Mayur_Tendulkar. In this presentation, we are going to discuss about what are the different options and technologies that we have when we want to migrate our applications from on-premises or from any other cloud to Microsoft Azure. There are so many options that we have in Microsoft Azure that sometimes this journey or this migration process can be overwhelming. And my idea over here is to simplify this. So let's get started. When we are migrating to the cloud, we need to have a plan, we need to have a strategy. So otherwise it could be very overwhelming. So we need to understand why we are migrating to the cloud. We need to have a plan about migrating the current assets. So for that reason we need to do some assessment. Then we need to create a subscription, or we need to create a landing zone in Microsoft Azure where we will be migrating these assets. And once we migrate these assets, we need to do some governance, we need to do some monitoring so that we are adhere to the compliances and we are utilizing the cloud in a right manner. To cover all of this, Microsoft has created something called as Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework for Azure. This is a guidance that you have. I will highly recommend that go through this Cloud Adoption Framework on documentation and have it a look and give it a look. So the first question that we need to ask and understand is why we want to migrate our applications to the cloud. There could be very different reasons, and these reasons can give us the motivations and many other details. For example, one reason could be the data center being deprecated. If the data center is being deprecated, let's say within 1 month, we have 1 month's timeline to migrate that entire infrastructure to the cloud. The other reason could be licenses are being expired, and typically licenses you have for 1 year, 2 year, 3 year validity. So you know when the license is being expired, and if suppose you have 1 year, you know that okay, you have 1 year to migrate your application, and probably you want to just migrate the solution as it is, or probably you want to kind of make some changes during the migration process. So asking this why is super important. So you need to understand the motivations behind this migration. So once we understand why we are migrating the application to the cloud, we need to understand the current landscape. That means we need to do some assessment. There could be hundreds of different applications that are being migrated. If suppose the entire data center is being deprecated, right? So we need to create an Excel sheet or Word document or a PDF document with all these details. So we need to understand for each application what is the name of it, what is the use case, what are the features, what are the versions. There could be one application with 2 versions simultaneously running in this data center. So we need to understand the motivations behind that as well, and we need to write it down so that we will cover it during the migration plan. We also need to understand the technology stack. For example, what is the application type, whether it's a Windows application, whether it's a web application, whether it's an API, whether it's an integration service, what is it? What language it is running, what language has been used to build that application. What is the hosting model? Is it hosted inside IaaS? It is hosted inside any other web server, or it is just plain simple deployed solution? So what is the deployment model for that? And if suppose this particular application is using any third-party libraries or integration, for example, this application could be using Telerik or Syncfusion like controls, It could be using crystal report like reporting mechanisms. So we need to understand all this and write it down during the understanding of current landscape. We also need to understand what is the current utilization of this application. For example, if it's a HR application, probably it is used heavily during the first week or the last week of the month when there is a payroll. So people can go ahead and download their pay slips. It could be used heavily during the seasonal workload. For example, during Diwali, people are applying for leave, so everybody is rushing to the leaves portal and applying for leave. So we need to understand whether this load is predictive or unpredictable, or it's a constant load. For example, let's say every day morning, let's say you have 70,000 employees, so 70,000 employees are just checking in to mark their attendance, and in the evening they are checking out to saying that, hey, I'm leaving for home. So you need to understand the current utilization of the application as well, so that it will help us to migrate accordingly and set the scale rules accordingly. We also need to understand the existing assets and write it down. For example, the customer might have invested in physical servers in the data center. There would be different networking devices, different licenses. For example, customer might have bought Windows Server licenses, SharePoint licenses, SQL Server licenses. So when migrating to the cloud, does it mean that the customer needs to throw away all these licenses? No. Probably the customer can bring those licenses to the cloud and use the hybrid benefit. So yes, definitely we need to write down all these details as well. And eventually at the last, we also need to think about the culture of the team. For example, whether the team is technology focused, they are early adopters in terms of technology. For example, let's say they are already using .NET Core, already using .NET 5, something that sort of, or they are still with .NET 2.0 like applications. They are still managing 2.0 like applications. Are they following any processes? Are they using any CI/CD pipelines? Do they know DevOps? Have they adopted the DevOps culture? So this also helps to plan the migration process. So definitely when you are migrating your applications, if it's 1 or 2 applications, probably you don't need to do this exercise. But if you are working with big organizations and you have to migrate all these applications, all these different data centers all together, it is really important to write down everything. Now here what I have done is I have created one simple application which we will be using to migrate to the cloud. So I am developing this application called as My Devices, which is basically a company asset management tool. So consider when I joined Microsoft, probably Microsoft gives me a laptop, it gives me a keyboard, mouse, headset, probably, right? So basically this tool, what it does, it writes down the inventory against a particular employee. So for example, my employee name is Maitan. So for me, laptop is issued, let's say Surface Book. So the OEM is Microsoft, the model is my Surface Book 2, and the serial number is whatever. So this tool is basically helps to write down all these different things so that it becomes easier to manage the inventory. This tool is publicly accessible over internet, so that people working remotely can still go ahead and store these details. For example, let's say this device is shipped to me at my home. Considering the COVID situation, I can just log into my assets or mydevices.com and enter these details against my email ID. So yeah, it is publicly accessible over internet. This tool at this moment I'm building using ASP.NET Core, and we have SQL Server based database as a backend. This entire web app is running inside IIS on a virtual machine, and the database is running on the same virtual machine itself. So now quickly, let me show you how the application looks like. So as I mentioned, this is the ASP.NET Core MVC application. So you can see I have this C# based class, which is a model for my application, and this entire thing is available over here, and I can jolly well just run it in IIS Express, and it should be available over here, right, as you can see. So let me just quickly see. Okay, it is running already. So I can say login and I can enter my details and password, and when I say login, it logs me into my system. And as this application is still work in progress, I haven't given the URL over here, so you can see the shortcut for devices controller over here, and I have these different devices registered for me. I don't have actually all these different devices. Let me just delete it. I have only Surface Book 2. So okay, so this looks good to me. So this is the simple application that we have, and what we are going to do is we are going to migrate this application to the cloud. So let's discuss what are the different options that we have and how we will migrate this application to the cloud. So when we want to migrate the application, this is the matrix that we have, and these are the so many options that we have. For example, where do we want to migrate? We have options like virtual machines, Azure Batch, App Service, Functions, Containers, Service Fabric, Kubernetes, and blah 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 blah. Now, if you are master in virtual machines, probably you will just want to migrate it to a virtual machine. But in English, as we say, when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. All these applications could be easily migrated to virtual machines. But wait, there are these options available. So when these options are good to use, we can discuss using this matrix. For example, I want to migrate my application from on-premises to the cloud, and the first question that I ask is, why do we want to migrate? Okay, the data center is being deprecated and I have only 1 month's time. So within 1 month, can I go ahead and refactor or rewrite this application? Probably yes, but then I need to have some bandwidth. I need to have some developers who can go ahead and write this application again for the new environment. Or I can just move that virtual machine as it is, so which is called as lift and shift. So I can just get that virtual machine where the application is running and move it to Azure and host it over there and make it available so that anybody can use it. If suppose my licenses are being expired, what I can do is I have, let's say, 3 to 6 months window to refactor or rewrite this application. So in that case, I will do some modernization. Probably I will do some containerization. So depending on the use case, depending on the time that I have, I can go ahead and choose these different options. I will highly recommend to go ahead and give a thorough look at this documentation and at this chart, so that it will be very helpful to understand which application should be considered for which scenario and where it should be moved. Now let's consider our same application, which is the My Devices application, and let's consider how can we migrate it to some of these different options. Now the first option that we have is definitely the virtual machine on Azure. That is, the virtual machine that I have at this moment, I will be migrating to the cloud as it is, migrating to the Azure as it is. There are tools like Azure Migrate which can help me to migrate this virtual machine to the cloud. We are not going to get into the details of it, but let me just show you what does it mean by running a virtual machine on Azure, and how we can expose the virtual machine to the for public. So now VM on Azure is nothing but just a compute on Azure. So you have options of choosing Windows or Linux operating systems. If suppose I am using let's say .NET Framework 4.1, definitely I need to have a Windows virtual machine. But as we are running our application in .NET Core, and .NET Core is cross-platform, that means I can run it on Windows as well as Linux. I can choose the Linux operating system as well. Now consider one more point over here, that these virtual machines are optimized for compute, memory, and general purpose. So when you are buying a virtual machine or provisioning a virtual machine in Azure, you need to select the right scope. You have option to select different number of cores, different size of the hard disk, different size of the memory, but then you need to understand whether it is optimized for compute, memory, or general purpose. There are also some pre-image software images available on marketplace. So for example, let's say you want to host your application on Ubuntu, so you can go ahead and get the Ubuntu operating system image and create a virtual machine from that. Or you can say that, hey, I am continuously developing my application and my development environment itself is my production environment. So you can go ahead and say that, okay, let me buy the Visual Studio 2019 virtual machine with the latest edition of Visual Studio. And let me just try how actually how I can do a development and testing on my virtual machine, and then probably I will move my application to the production environment. Something that sort of you can do. So there are pre-image software images available on marketplace, and you can also use reserved instances and hybrid benefits. So my devices application is going to be used, let's say, at least for 1, 2, 3 or 5 years down the line. And what I can do is I can say that, hey, I'm going to use this virtual machine for 1 year, 2 years here, or 5 years down the line. So let me reserve it for myself. So when you reserve this virtual machine for these many years, you get discounts in the pricing. And definitely, as I mentioned, that when we are migrating, we need to have a plan, and we can it doesn't mean when migrating to the cloud, it doesn't mean that we need to throw away our existing infrastructure and licenses, because we can take the hybrid benefit. That means if you have existing investment in Windows licenses or database licenses, you can bring those to Azure and save on the licenses bit. So these are the different options that we have when considering virtual machine on Azure. So now I have already created a virtual machine on Azure. I was showing you a virtual machine on Azure. So let me quickly show you how you can expose this virtual machine so that anybody can come and access your application over public network. So this is the application that I have, and you can see this application is hosted in IIS. I have this one particular website over here, and what I have done is, this is you can see migration VM Southeast Asia Cloud App Azure.com, right? So here I have this migration demo resource group, and I have all my different resources created within this resource group. This is the first resource that I have, which is a migration VM. What I did is basically I went to the DNS, I provided a static IP. I said that, hey, I want to use the static IP, and I provided a DNS name label. This is the first thing that you need to do. The second thing that we will be doing is we go to the networking bit and add a rule for port 80. We say that, hey, I want to allow internet connection. Okay, so destination port is 80. So whenever there is a inbound connection for port 80, just forward it. So we have just allowed it. So what I can do is I can just go to the migration demo. Again, let me go to the VM. I can just copy this URL, and it is already here, but let me just quickly type it again. So here we are. So let me log in. I'm using the same database, so the same username password should work over here, and we should have the same application and same data. Okay, so we have the same data. So let's say create a new one, and let's say I bought the HP Elite book. Let's say serial code is and owned by again Methane at Microsoft.com, and let's say create. So now I have 2 devices associated with me, right? So this is a simple application. So there are different options to migrate virtual machines. So there are different vendors, there are different partners who can help you migrate your existing virtual machine to the cloud. So this is very much possible. Now, as we just saw how we can migrate how we can use the existing virtual machine onto the Azure, and how we can expose it for public utilization. Let's see what other options that I have. Now, the next option that I have is something called as web application. So the virtual machine that we saw is nothing but an infrastructure as a service. And what we are moving to is something called as a platform as a service. When we think about the virtual machine, you need to take care of everything, right from provisioning the virtual machine, right from, assigning it an IP address, installing the operating system, patching it, managing it, securing it, all these things which are, managing that entire infrastructure, you have to do it. If suppose there are, the load increases, for example, all of a sudden you see that you hired, let's say 10,000 people, and you have to provide the access to this service so that they can register their devices. All of a sudden there will be a load on this virtual machine, and you need to provision another virtual machine. So that provisioning you need to do manually. Now, when we say platform as a service, what happens is it is a fully managed service. That what does it mean? That the infrastructure, the security, patching and scaling is handled by the cloud provider itself. You don't need to worry about, hey, shall I, go ahead and install .NET Framework 3.1, 2.1 or something like that sort of. You just select once, and whatever patches are required, whatever scaling is required, Microsoft in this case will take care of it. Ideally, you also don't need to select the operating system version as well. For example, if you are using the .NET Framework 4.0, automatically you will get a Windows virtual machine. If suppose you are using .NET Core, you have option to select Windows or Linux. And if you are using Ruby, again, you will get Linux automatically. It has support for all the different frameworks for creating web applications and APIs in the cloud. So you can create applications in ASP.NET, Node.js, Java, Python, and many more frameworks are supported. Also, it supports Git, GitHub, Azure DevOps, Bitbucket for CI/CD. So if you have a culture of DevOps, you may want to continuously integrate your application and continuously deploy onto the cloud. So whenever somebody checks into the code automatically gets compiled, automatically gets pushed to the the testing environment. You test that, and once you approve that, it goes to the production environment. So if you want to have that kind of automation, that automation is tightly integrated with the web app. The next feature that we have over here is deployment slots. So for example, you have one application. What you can say is that, hey, my application is running fine. Let me have another version, another update, but then rather than putting it to the production, let me have it running on another virtual machine, and 20% of the traffic which comes to my website, let me divert it to the new beta version. And once I am confident that, hey, this 20% users are also fine, they are also happy with my current new application, I will just swap it. So that means my beta version will become the production version. So that means when I say deployment slot, you can do A/B kind of a testing, and you have two versions of your applications running side by side. And the last bit is very important, is you get auto scale on rules with 99.95% SLA. So you don't need to provision virtual machines manually to handle the load. Here you can say that, okay, if suppose my load on my web application goes beyond 70%, okay, for 1 minute or 2 minutes, go ahead and provision another web app instance. So you will get another virtual machine behind the scene, another infrastructure behind the scene, which can handle which can handle the load which is coming to your website. Similarly, again, if suppose the second instance also is getting 70% hit, again you can have third instance. So you can go up to like 20 such instances, and when there is no load as such, the number of instances also gets reduced to 1, so that at least your application is always running. So now let's go ahead and see web app on Azure Demo. So I have this application already running over here. So what I'm going to do is, let me open up so I have this application running over here. Let me open the appmigration.microsoft.com. This is one website where you can assess your application. So let me just copy this URL, paste it over here, to see if this particular application can be migrated to Azure App Service, which is a web app. So when I say assess, what it does, it goes and do some scanning of that web application. It says that, hey, it is written in ASP.NET and hosted in IIS 10, and you can see that all these options are green. That means I can migrate this application to the cloud easily. I can also check for other details. For example, I'm using jQuery, I'm using HTML5 specific tags, Twitter Bootstrap, CSS, and all that stuff. So if suppose if all these items are green, that means I can easily migrate. You can add in any website. So for example, Mayur which is my personal website hosted on WordPress. You can see that, okay, it is 2011 PHP, some ASP.NET, the domain name is on GoDaddy, then it is running on IIS 7 and all that stuff. So you have all these details. So, and all again is green. That means I can migrate my entire blog to to Azure as well. So that is also a possibility. So when we say start migrating over here, we have these applications called as Migration Assistant. So considering my application is in .NET and it is running inside a Windows virtual machine, I can download this application and start migrating. I will show you how to do it, how to do the migration in a minute. Then we also have a migration assistant in preview for Java applications and migration assistant available for Java again on Linux as well. It is in preview. So please go ahead, if you have such applications, download it, test it, and if you have any feedback, do let us know. So I have already downloaded this on a virtual machine where my application is running. So let me just quickly grab it. So here we have this virtual machine where our application is running. So, and this is the app service migration assistant that we have. Sorry for all the pressure cooker noise. These are the things happen when you are working from home. So here I have this My Devices site running in my IIS. So I have just selected it. So next, it again scans your application, and okay, you can see that I meet the success criteria. For example, I am not using any unsupported TCP ports or protocols. I am not using any unsupported authentication. For example, when migrating, probably Windows authentication will not be supported. So we need to think about that as well. So all these things are taken care of. It's all success. I don't have any warning or errors. If suppose there are any warnings or error, we may need to fix it before we start the migration. So next, and it asks me to copy this code and open the browser. So basically it asks me to sign into my Azure portal, and once I sign in, okay, I can close this, come back, and it asks me if suppose if I have any Azure migration project. I don't have any migration project as such because I am just moving one application. But if you are migrating many applications, virtual machines, you may want to create an Azure migration project. And let's say the next, and we have different options. So let me select the subscription. I have multiple subscriptions, so I select one. I can create a new resource group or use existence. So I have already created a resource group called Migration Demo. I can give a name as Migrate Site X and Azure Websites.net. I can use create a new app service plan or use existing. So basically, app service plan tells me how many instances can I have for this particular web application. What are the features that are available? So basically, it is a SKU or it is a pricing plan that gets associated over here. So I have already created one, so P1 V2 I will use it, and I'm going to skip the database at this moment because my database is already up and running. So I will use the same database, or you can use a hybrid connection, which is basically using your existing on-premises database and connect to it. So you just need to provide the name of the on-premises database server and the port. Or you can skip the database setup at this moment, and just like we are using the app service migration assistant, we also have something called as data migration service. So you can use that to migrate your databases to the cloud. But we are not going to cover it in this session. So when I say next, this will start migrating the application to the cloud, and eventually the application will be available on Azure in a web app. So let me quickly jump over here, and you can see this is how it should be doing. So this is a web application. Okay, this is not a virtual machine. So this is the web application, and this is the website URL, migrationsite.azurewebsites.net. Let me copy it, and here I have already pasted, but let me just repaste it and log in. So I can log in with my credentials over here, and once I log in, it's the same application again. Right now, a couple of things I wanted to show you. So you can go ahead and do a quick start, and you can see ASP.NET, Java, Node.js, PHP, Python is already supported. So you can start building applications in these different frameworks. There are deployment slots available, as I mentioned. So for example, I have this production slot and beta slot. So I can say that okay, I have my new version of the application. Let me have it on the beta slot, and 20% of my traffic will go to the beta. And once I'm confident, okay, that hey, my beta site is running fine, users are happy, I can go ahead and migrate it. I can just swap the slot to the migration site. That means my new version is deployed onto the production. We also have something called as deployment center, where you can create a CI/CD pipeline for Azure repos, GitHub, Bitbucket, or even local Git. It can be overwhelming for some users. Some users are just learning, and they just want to have a quick and easy way to push and sync the code. So you can use the OneDrive, Dropbox, or even FTP upload as well. So you can also go ahead and say that, hey, I want to add authentication. So when I say I want to have authentication, you can configure your application to use all these different authentication mechanisms. For example, you can use Active Directory, or you can use the Microsoft, that is at Hotmail or at Outlook, like Microsoft accounts, Facebook, or social media authentications as well. Or if suppose you want to have your own delegated authentication server as well, that is also possible. You can also attach a custom domain name. For example, you can have my10.com, my10.dev, Mayur.Tendulkar.com. So you can attach a custom domain as well. And the last bit that I wanted to show you is app service plan, and here auto scaling that we have. So I want to say that, hey, I want to automatically scale my virtual machine. So I can say the instance limit minimum is 1. So that means one machine is always running, and maximum is 5. And default is 1. That is, each increase the instances by 1 at a time. So let me add a rule over here. So I can say that, hey, okay, when my app service plan CPU percentage increases, let's say 70%, okay, go ahead and add one more instance to this. That means automatically another infrastructure will be provided for me for this particular migration website, if suppose the load or the CPU percentage increases to 70%. And same, I can decrease it when required. So I can have some rules mentioned, and automatically my application will scale out or scale in. So these are the different options that we have, and you can see that everything is managed through the by the cloud provider itself. You don't need to think about, do I need to install new version of Windows, do I need to install new version of .NET, do I need to do a patching, how do I handle the scaling part. So everything is taken care. So that's the beauty of the managed service. So we just saw the demo of having a web application on Azure. Let's see what other options that we have. So you can see the same application, my devices. I could just lift and shift to the cloud in a virtual machine. I can little bit modernize it or tweak it and migrate it to a platform service, which is web app on Azure. And the third option that we have is a serverless. So serverless is basically you don't need to think about server itself. So here you can see we are increasing the instance, we are setting up some rules about increasing the instance count automatically, right? So whenever CPU utilization is 70%, increase the count. So we are doing it for web app. Now when we move to the serverless, we don't even need to take care of that, because that will be taken care by the cloud provider itself. Now, even though the name suggests serverless, don't go by that. There will be always a server which is serving your request. So when we think about the serverless, there are three options that we have: Power Automate, Logic App, and Functions. And it totally depends on what is the scenario. So ideally speaking, Power Automate is the perfect solution for us. For example, let's say we have an organization like Microsoft, and there are about, let's say, 10,000 employees, let's assume. So all these 10,000 employees are going to use this tool to register the device details onto the portal. So this particular application makes perfect sense for Microsoft employees. So because that will be used within Microsoft environment itself. However, there will be use cases where there are some third-party vendors who are also joining Microsoft for some time. contractors, or maybe somebody else also wants to temporarily work for a Microsoft project. So in that case, they don't have at Microsoft domain ID. They have some different email IDs and they still want to contribute, they still want to participate. So in that case, Power Automate doesn't suit. So Power Automate is for one organization. If you want to execute any particular application in a serverless fashion within the organization, Power Automate makes sense. Logic App is no code solution where you can I will not say no code, I will say low code, because there is still possibility of writing some code within Logic App. So think of it like designer you have, where you have steps. Let's say, for example, add entry to the file. Once the entry is added to the file, get that entry, then enter that entry into a SQL database, something that sort of. So Logic App allows you to design and orchestrate the business workflows. And then we have something called as Azure Functions, which is a serverless full code solution where you will write code to automate many things. You will integrate many things. For example, as soon as somebody has entered anything in the database, use the notification hub to send a notification to respective users, something that sort of. So you have to choose what suits you. For example, if the solution is within organization, go for Power Automate. If the solution is for business users, probably Power Automate is the best thing. If it is just about integrating different systems, probably the Logic App. But if it's a complex algorithm, it's a complex stuff that you are doing and you need to write some code, Functions is the best suited. So Functions in serverless fashion, it allows you to execute a bits of a code, and at this moment as I'm presenting, Functions support C#, JavaScript, Python, Java and PowerShell. So you can write code in these different languages. It's a event driven and trigger based. For example, you can have a cron job. So let's say every day 7 o'clock in the morning, do something, that sort of stuff you can do with the serverless. It can also be executed by HTTP request. So whenever somebody calls your API, do something, that sort of. Or you can also have connector triggers. For example, somebody entered some details in a file, then do something, that sort of. It can automatically scale out and in as and when required. So you don't need to plan and say that, okay, whenever my CPU utilization 70%, do something. You don't need to say that. It automatically handles the scaling. There are 3 different models where you can host your serverless function. One is a consumption based, where depending on the consumption, scaling happens. Then there is a premium, so you can say that, okay, or app service plan, where you can say that, okay, I need to have a dedicated environment for my function. So you can do that as well. So now let's go ahead and quickly see how we can do the serverless bit. So let me switch the gear over here. So here I am in my forms designer, and what I have done is I have designed a form which is basically called as my devices. So if you have Office 365, you can use the forms designer, or you can create an Excel sheet, or create a simple HTTP page as a static page as well with these details. For example, OEM and the answer for that, the model and the serial number. And this is a simple application that I have, and what I have done is, if I do a preview, it looks like this. So I just need to fill in these details. I am not collecting the email ID, because when the user logs in, automatically that email ID is provided. Here what I have done is I have created a Logic App, and as I mentioned, that Logic App is basically a design orchestration. So here I added a trigger for connector for Microsoft Forms, and I logged in over there, and I selected, okay, I have this form, so let me select it. And the next step that I'm doing is I'm getting the response details. So whenever somebody adds details over here, I'm just getting the details of the recently added device, and then getting those details, and I'm pushing those details in the SQL server, the same SQL server which I have been using for all my different applications. So you can see from these response details, I can get the model number, OEM, responders email as well, and submission time as well. probably next step I want to do something sort of like, let's say I want to send an email. So let me just say Outlook. So I can use Office 365 or Outlook.com task to send an email once this operation is complete. So let's do one thing. Let me just add some details over here. Let's say I just bought a Lenovo ThinkPad X1, and let's say this is silicon, not carbon, and let's say serial number is and submit. So ideally this should execute automatically. It may take some time. Okay, it looks like it has already executed. So if I come over here, I can check the details. So there is the details of the execution. So you can see these are the details of this execution, and if I go to my SQL server, these details are over here. So now if I just refresh this, oh wow, I have these details added over here, and it has automatically picked up my email address as well. So now I am not, sorry for this interruption. So you can see that I am not using any server over here, any infrastructure over here. I am the consumption based approach. The logic app automatically executes, automatically performs all the actions. Now if required, what I can do is I can, if suppose there is a complex algorithm, I can replace this form with Azure function itself. I can have a static page, and I can go ahead and create the entire website in Azure function itself. So that is also doable. So here we just saw how we can migrate our applications to Azure function or serverless. Now when we think about the other options, we can move this application to Azure container instances as well. So we can containerize our solution and move it into the container instances. We can move it to the service fabric. We can move it to the Kubernetes. But definitely you need to have that scenario. You need to have that use case for these different technologies. So to give you some ideas, so the gist of this presentation is you have different options, but you need to understand. You need to ask first why you are migrating your solution to the cloud. So you will have idea about the deadlines, the team culture, the technology stack, and once you have these details, you can decide whether to go with the virtual machine, whether to go with the Azure badge, whether to go with app service. So all these details you can decide over here. Okay. And these are the references that we have, which is basically cloud adoption framework. You can go to bit.ly/MicrosoftCaf. There is also a Azure migration program which can help you to migrate applications or even data centers to the cloud. There was a nice session by Nish and Gaurav happened on 24th September at Ignite about Ask Me Anything. You may want to check on that as well. Recording should be available. So thank you once again for attending this presentation. My name is Mayur Tendulkar. I work as customer engineer at Microsoft India, and you have my credential over here. So if you have any questions, please reach out to me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is @Mayur_Tendulkar. Thank you.